I'd like to go a little bit deeper into your kind of your view that it isn't for everyone.
Yes.
What makes it not for everyone? Like, and I don't mean, obviously I
And
understand that not everybody's going to immediately grasp it, but what
yes.
makes it not so, so I would see it as something personally that could be extremely helpful to anyone who is willing to allow it into their worldview, right? But what would make it not great for somebody? I don't
And
know
what
if
do
I
you
phrased that
think,
correctly. Yeah.
if I can turn the table for just a second, what do you think about that?
Okay. So I could definitely see, for example, that for some people, based on their life experience and their current worldviews, if they were to mix Stoicism with that, it could actually lead to a certain complacency, a
Hmm.
certain acceptance of a very bad lot in life, even though
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
have the ability to change it. There's certain
Yes.
situations where if you
The
mix
problem of
Stoicism with a
passivity. Yes.
worldview and a current existence, right, you might
Mhm.
lead down a negative path. But if you
Exactly. Yes.
understand Stoicism on the level that maybe you understand it, right, surely,
Hopefully, yes.
yeah, that's it. There's always that hope. But if you move past that, if you get to the stage where somebody has accepted that there are some ancient truths here that play a role in our lives, and they're able to see the value in these exercises, I'm not, and I'm completely open to being proved wrong. Like, like what would make it not valuable for somebody?
So yeah, what you said is something I fully agree with. That is that, and I already wrote about it, and I call it the conservative misinterpretation of Stoicism. That if we read it wrong on some level, it can lead to a kind of superficial conclusion that Stoicism about just sitting down, doing nothing, and just basically accepting what is happening in this kind of passive, failed way. And I argue in both my books that this is obviously the wrong reading of Stoicism, and we shouldn't go down that avenue, because Stoicism is much more active philosophy of action, of living an active life, and so on and so on and so on. So that's one possible misunderstanding. Now, getting back to the original question, which is very, very fair. Obviously, my answer is that certain artists will be might be folks who are not interested in Stoicism. What I mean is that in general, there will be people who might want to pursue, generally speaking, other things than happiness in
Mm.
our life, right? One of the absolutely key premises of Stoicism is that we are seeking happiness. The goal of it all is to find a better way to live to live a better, more fulfilled, more satisfying, happier, eudaimonia, full of eudaimonia life, and so on and so on, however we want to call that. This is the direction of Stoicism. This is all about that. But the thing is that as I said, there are certain people who will prefer to seek other things in life. For example, creative fulfillment, being creating something, a work of art, something which is valuable in not the Stoic way, but the artistic way. And this is my favorite example, of course, because I wrote an entire book on that. Is there a paradox? Is there a problem between the Stoic ideal and the creative ideal on the other hand? And as we all know from the history of art and literature, there are many authors and many artists who kind of lived lives that had nothing to do with what we think about in Stoicism, right? And that's the
Mm.
problem. That's just on some level. Some say it is a stereotype, but on some level, it is not. It is a deep decision that we, for example, being an artist, I want to create. That's the first, final, and foremost, vocation in my life, and I go with that. And if that brings me misery or happiness, I just embrace that. And this is a perfectly legit way to go, and this kind of culturally praised. We know those great artists and so on and so on. But it is something different than Stoicism. So one that's why that's one way to answer that. Some people just don't really want happiness, and for example, those may be artists.
Yeah. And I guess my only question for that,
Mm-hmm.
as reasonable as I think that is, wouldn't you see a pursuit of a creative outlet? And this comes from, I'm a musician myself, and so
So that's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Then you understand me. Then you understand what I'm saying. I assume that's hands down.
Yeah, of course.
So,
And so I understand that you want to reach a creative pursuit, but the creation of that creative pursuit brings me a lot of meaning in my life, right? It brings me a certain amount of happiness that is simply a byproduct of being a more
but
effective human being, right?
is it still Stoicism?
Well, that's my question. You
Yes.
see, yeah.
Mhm.
I see. I'm not too sure if I'm trying to understand whether Stoicism is a framework for thinking effectively more than it is a a a. I know it's a way of life, but I think it's also a framework for becoming an effective human being at whatever you do. And
Yes.
that's why
Yes.
we
Yes.
see so many people doing so many
I
different
agree
things. But
100%.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, it is a way to. I totally agree with all the phrases you said. A way of being a more efficient human being, a more effective person, to be happier, to think more, to think in a better way. This kind of the way of thinking and way of doing things, the principles of thought and conduct. These are all the phrases I believe you can find in my book. Some of them verbatim. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, the real positively philosophical thing here is that whether or not um, happiness attained in a non-stoic way, is it still stoic happiness? Which may
Yeah.
seem a little confusing, but I believe that's a point here. And my answer might be, I would lean to say no, in the sense that if an artist achieves creative fulfillment, produces something great, and it is socially praised and so on and so on and so on, there is this feeling of fulfillment, some deep satisfaction, or however you want to call that. But it is something different, I believe, than at least in many cases different than what we are trying to pursue in Stoicism, and hence this kind of a tension between artists and the Stoics, right? The fulfillment of the creative process and the fame that may come from our artistic pursuits. It's something different than the Stoic stuff, I believe.
Yeah.
Although, so that's one way to think about that. But although, on the other hand, there would be, this refers, I believe, to only to some artists. There are many other guys who will be perfectly happy with Stoicism, who will find Stoicism helping their
Yeah.
creative endeavors. And obviously, which happens all the time, if your work goes unrecognized, and no one listens to your music, no one reads your books, and so on and so on. Stoicism will obviously help with that. By it's not
Yeah.
about it's not in our control, and so on and so on. So this is the story here, I believe.
Yeah. And this is such an interesting discussion for me, because I think now that I think about it, I agree that there's a different type of happiness, right? So if you're an artist who
Mm-hmm.
seeks that kind of that praise from society for your work, every
Mm-hmm.
artist goes into their own creations hoping that maybe one day it will be recognized by someone, right? As beautiful.
Yes, I
Uh,
will mildly agree. Yes.
but you might also make the argument that some of the greatest artists in any field of culture within our societies are those artists who may have had a very stoic approach to it, in that it was all about the process for them, not about the end. It was about, they didn't give a
Very good
damn
point. Yes.
what
Mm-hmm.
anybody thought about their art, because their art was only an expression of themselves and not an expression of anything that they wanted society to appreciate, right? So that's
Yes,
why art pushes the boundaries, right? Because it's like,
and
I
this is
don't
exactly,
care
yeah,
what you
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just for the record. This is exactly what I'm discussing in my, among other things, in my previous book. Does happiness write blank pages? The title, I believe, speaks for itself. And this is exactly that. On this level, Stoicism may help a lot. That in artistic activity, in creative activity in general, there is something, or there should be, at least I believe there should be, this element of focusing on what you are trying to do and not what other people will or do say about that. And this converges nicely with Stoicism, and obviously there would be certain there is a parallel here obviously. But on a different level, the artist is focusing on the creative person is focusing on trying to create something, some external thing. It may be a good podcast, it may be a piece of music, a book, whatever. And this is not, I think, exactly what the Stoics mean. I mean, they urge us to focus on, in a way, on ourselves, on working up our own narratives. To use a metaphor, I guess we may say that for the Stoics, we ourselves are the best work of art for ourselves. I mean, it is, as a Stoic, it is my goal to focus on turning myself into a piece of art, right? That my goal, my creative goal, is to create a good life for myself and by myself, and in a way through myself. And that I should focus on doing this, and not on drawing paintings, producing music, or writing books. So that would be a difference here. And I believe that the ancient Stoics had this kind of disdain towards art, literature, and poetry, and I believe it roots from here exactly.
No, Dan, this is such an interesting discussion. I'm loving this, Peter, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately as well. It's like, one of the reasons I don't want to draw I don't want to draw a massive connection between something like Christianity and Stoicism, right? Because they're completely different things. Like one requires you to believe in something that might not necessarily be completely provable. The other is a philosophy where we talk about ideas, right? And so, but the connection that I would draw in this circumstance is, you might argue that one of the reasons why religions have been so good at taking such a common place within our societies is because of their embracing of culture, right? Their embracing of arts and music and like
well, that's a good point. Okay.
There's like a real importance there for bringing music, because music is, to me, even music and art is nothing but a representation of the beauty of the world that we live in, right? All music and art it's you might call it a direct image of nature, right? It mimics the sounds that we hear in nature, and has always done that since we're playing drums and all sorts of things. And so as a musician, I try to think of the ways that I can incorporate more art and culture into the canon of Stoicism.
So there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. Starting from the bottom line, in the previous book, in Does Happiness Write Blank Pages, on Stoicism and artistic creativity, my headline there is not that an artist and a Stoic are two necessarily different folks.
Oh yeah, and I don't want you to think that I'm just arguing.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm saying is that in that book I analyze a number of ways of thinking about art, kind of motifs, kind of themes of artistic creativity, and some of them can diverge. It can work well with Stoicism, and some of them cannot. For example, if your only goal in your creative pursuit is to become famous, then clearly it's a non-Stoic thing, right? But what you just said, to try to try to convey the beauty of the natural world, to kind of imitate the beauty of things of natural things in your music, poetry, or whatever, that would be a Stoic thing. I think, yeah, that we may agree here, right? That with the, now not in the Reformed Stoicism, but in ancient Stoicism, there's obviously this was this clear thinking that the world is a great place and everything is beautiful, kind of well arranged and so well tuned in, and so on and so on and so on. And if you, particularly by music, if you try to kind of tune into that and express that, then that's a Stoic thing. So this approach to artistic creativity will work well, can work well with Stoicism. So I agree here.
Yeah.
And that's a fair point to be made, that there are kind of different aspects here. So that would be one thing. For the other, I can tell you this, just as a quick detour. Yesterday, there was I got an email that for I believe 5 or 6 weeks, all the classes I have at University of Warsaw, I mean all classes entirely, will be cancelled for over a month here at University of Warsaw. So I won't see my students in philosophy of religion course for some time till mid-April. But when we're back in class, I will totally bring up to them that point, because this is something I teach a course of philosophy and religion, and this is something we didn't really touch so far. That the good point you made here, that the kind of power of religion, the popularity, the thing that religion is with us since time immemorial, and it isn't going anywhere definitely anytime soon. It is kind of propelled by the fact that religion, at least Christianity, kind of embraces various aspects of cultural life, right? That religions, maybe paradoxically, are somehow open to earthly life, and they are various aspects like culture, like art, and so on and so on and so on. At least they used to be, and that's a good factor here. And yes, and here there would be this kind of a non-obvious difference between Stoicism and the religion, Christianity, to put it plainly. That Stoicism is much more, in a way, focused on itself, in a way, while Christianity, is much more multifaceted and has these connections with arts and other things. Stoicism is much more self-contained, and that would be a fair point here.
And